Good Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. I hope you're having a good afternoon. Yesterday was not a good afternoon for the Browns. Fell to 1-2, 21-15 loss to the New York Giants. When they win, it is Victory Monday. We are now starting something. When the Browns lose, it's going to be piling on Monday. With that in mind, let's get things rolling as we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. What a pathetic performance. But anyway, it's time for Stefanski to give up the play calling, I think. He had a few good ones, blah, blah, blah. But let's give Dorsey a chance. We hired him as an offensive coordinator. Give him a chance. And he'll own up to his mistakes. Not like Stefanski going to get up there and tell us a big lie. But anyways, I love you, brother. Be good, be safe, you and the family. And that's all. Got to be in touch. Thank you, David.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, Browns beat reporter, as well as BrownsZone.com. Scott, there wasn't much that went. I could find fault with anything in that game. There isn't much I couldn't find fault with. The offensive line is a mess, is the main thing.
Yeah, and it's a combination of the offensive line and the protection, which goes beyond the offensive line. I didn't think they had a great plan for picking up the blitz. Part of that's coaching, part of that's the quarterback, part of that's the offensive line. They were surprised by how much the Giants blitzed. That's what Deshaun Watson said after the game. Stefanski said, hey, once they started early, we figured they'd keep bringing it, but they still didn't feel like they had a lot of great solutions to it. I don't think play calling's the issue. I never have. I think Stefanski's a good play caller. I think there's a lot of other things in play, and it starts with you better protect your quarterback. In 2 out of 3 games, they've not been able to do that.
Yeah, and you know what? If you want to blame, they didn't look like they were ready to play. And I'm a huge supporter of Kevin Stefanski. They just second home game, both home games, they weren't ready. I mean, you had the turnover, you had the touchdown, but you couldn't let Malik Neighbors beat you, and he did. And you can't protect the quarterback, and you couldn't.
Yeah, I don't know about the not ready thing. They didn't play well. I think there's a difference between not playing well and not being ready. They come out and score on the first play, get the fumble first play, and then they just don't do anything on offense. I thought the defense needed to be better. They were really good in the second half, just like against Dallas, but by then, it doesn't really matter because your offense is so bad that you're in a big hole that offense probably can't climb out of, although they got within 6 points late. And then, they have a fumble. They have a 3rd and 1 stop, a 4th and 1 where Watson has a guy open and doesn't throw it and tries to scramble. And then Cedric Tillman drops one late. So, a million things go wrong to make this loss. I'm not going to say they weren't ready, but they just didn't play well. And a lot of, part of that's on coaching. They didn't, you mentioned Neighbors, they went after MJ Emerson and they had success doing that. And you had to stop Neighbors and you had to protect the quarterback. You're completely right about that. And those two things the Browns failed to do.
Yeah. And again, yeah, I get your point. Certainly some of it has to fall on coaching, and I'm as big a supporter as Kevin Stefanski as anybody. And the 2 home games have not been good. Kevin Stefanski talked about the injuries as well as the game yesterday earlier today.
Injury front, I don't have all the updates just yet. Still working through some things. I can tell you Wyatt Teller has a knee injury. He'll miss multiple weeks, but I don't have the full extent just yet. Myles Garrett with his foot injury is day to day. And like I mentioned, on all those other ones, I'll update you when we get those all the information. Obviously frustrated, disappointed as you watch the tape. I think there are missed opportunities, certain things that we just have to do in order to win in this league, and we didn't do them. So disappointed. We'll learn from it, and then we'll quickly move on.
Well, and so word on Wyatt Teller is it's an MCL sprain. Could miss around 4 weeks, so the IR is potentially a possibility. And that's another guy. So now you've already got 3 tackles that are beat up. now you've got a guard that's beat up. It's not a it's a challenging situation.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. You probably have 4 tackles that are beat up to some extent. Yeah, you thought, okay, well, if the tackles are iffy, at least you can trust your 2 guards and a center, and now you're missing, your Pro Bowl right guard. So it keeps getting worse on that offensive line. I think you can, I think you can kind of not hide it, but you can work around some things on the offensive line. Look at Pittsburgh's winning games, and they got a bunch of injuries on their offensive line. The Browns did it in their playoff push last year. They had, they're down to like tackles, whatever, 4 and 5 or 5 and 6. But they need to be better. The plan needs to be better. Watson needs to be better, getting the ball out of his hands, reading the defense, and the line has to be better. There's plenty of times where it's one-on-one, whether it's, Posick or Batonio or the tackles or Teller, it doesn't matter. And the guys are losing their one-on-one matchup. They're struggling against any kind of stunts and twists up front, and that's what they need to get figured out. But it's not going to be any easier with Teller. And then we don't know about the tackles. I mean, all 4 of them, Conklin, Jones, Wills, and Hudson all have some level of injury. I think it's going to be another week of wait and see who's going to start at tackle for you.
All right, takeaways from every Week 3 game from the Bleacher Report. Browns should consider changes at offensive tackle. I'm sure they'd like to, but as we mentioned, they're all banged up. Jedrick Wills, Deron Jones struggle against the Giants' defensive front. Will's shortcomings are more of an issue because he's a starter who hasn't performed the level of a first-round pick. Browns may find an upgrade via trade or in the free agent pool. Scott, when I looked at Jones and Wills, neither one of them looked to be moving like you would expect them to be quite honestly.
Yeah, I mean, to talk about that thing, I don't know where the upgrade is.
Right.
Teams aren't giving away tackles. So, and I don't know if they're trading away tackles. So I think that's going to be hard. You got Jermaine Ifedi on the practice squad. I mean, he looks like he's the easiest option. And then if you need more, you got to go find someone somewhere. It's not going to be easy. Maybe you raid a practice squad. When it comes to the 2 tackles that started yesterday, Jones was not moving at all. And, I know he was limited with a knee injury. He didn't practice Wednesday, but he wasn't questionable. They knew he was going to play, and he just didn't look like he do. He didn't move. He didn't bend. He gave up a bunch of pressures. They made the switch at halftime. And then, I like Wills more than most people. I watched every snap again today, and it wasn't perfect, but I didn't think it was bad. He was not, in my opinion, the issue on that offensive line. And if he's healthy, if that knee injury left with yesterday doesn't keep him out, I think there's reason to think that he'll get better and he can solidify that left side of the line. But Jones has to be able to move better. For whatever reason, he wasn't, because you can't play him like that at right tackle.
So Tony Grossi talked about kind of the loss of offensive line coach Bill Callahan, if it's making a difference on the Browns' offensive line.
One guy, one assistant coach meant that much.
When you got one of the best, there's a big drop off to the next guy. There really is, and this is exactly where he was in his element, patchwork, putting guys in, and let's face it, the rest of the healthy veterans, they haven't looked good without him either.
Yeah, I can't argue. All I know is the line has been an issue. I don't know. Is it because they're asking them to do different things? I don't know. They got to figure something out. The line, you are not going to win many games when your offensive line plays like it has.
Well, that's 100% correct. And I will not pretend that the loss of Callahan doesn't have any kind of impact. I'm sure it does. Like Tony said, if you lose arguably the best coach and the best line coach in the league, whoever replaces him, it's going to be a drop-off. So I get that. I'm not quite ready to say that that's the only reason that the line is struggling. And it's not just the line. The protection is struggling. I think Kevin Stefanski's trying to help Andy Dickerson, the new line coach. I think Ken Dorsey's trying to help Deuce Staley. I think they're all in on this. But the patchwork thing is right. That was one of the things Callahan did well. But he also had great plans. Like, he was one of the big game planners when it came to the protection, came to the run game. So I think they do miss him in those areas. But to me, that shouldn't be like, oh, the offensive line can't perform anymore. Callahan's only one coach. There's 31 other teams in the league. There's teams winning Super Bowls and going to the playoffs without Bill Callahan. So the Browns should be able to figure out a way how to do that.
You wrote an article, and one of the bright spots, and we're struggling to find bright spots, was the play of Amari Cooper. A couple of touchdowns, made some nice catches. He looked like Amari Cooper.
Yeah, to me, that's what was noteworthy about it, is the first 2 games he did. 5 catches, I think it was 27 yards, a ton of targets, multiple drops, multiple big drops. And he seemed a different person Wednesday when we talked to him and talked about treating practice like the games and having a renewed focus and motivation, and how the first 2 games, he didn't use the term wake-up call, but that's what it felt like he was saying. And then he went out and played like that. And it started with the first play from scrimmage. He catches a touchdown pass, does a great job to get his feet in bounds. Tight coverage, great throw. And then throughout the game, whether it's beating a guy on a slant, he had a touchdown on a slant where one-on-one, and he just lulls the guy to sleep, like he's kind of acting like it's going to be a run, and then explodes. It's an easy throw for Watson because Cooper's so wide open. He makes another play down the sideline where he does an unbelievable job with body control to stay in bounds. He draws a pass interference. So that's the Amari Cooper you're used to seeing. And with this offense, particularly the pass offense, struggling like it is, they're going to need Cooper to play like that week in and week out.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. Be right back.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s. $10 each, 10 times multipliers. 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. Great show. Howard from Marin. What can I say? The Browns are outcoached on both sides of the ball, and also you're seeing the results of terrible decisions by the people at the top, not knowing that they need major overhaul of their line, not having an alternate tight end, and pinning your hopes on Deshaun Watson, who clearly has lost it. It's terrible. The line is terrible. Watson is terrible. They should probably start someone else, and it's going to be a long year. I really don't see how you're going to fix this. Thanks a lot. Take care.
As always, appreciates all of the voicemails. Scott, I wish I had the ray of sunshine and hope. They got a lot to fix, and they just do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they do, and I get it. It's Monday and they look terrible, and it was another home loss. What I will say is it is still one game, and this is the same conversation after the Dallas game, and it's not good that it's the same conversation 2 out of the first 3 weeks. Then they go to Jacksonville, and they play better. Watson played better. They had a run game. The plan was different. The defense played really well. And you can win a game like that. And I think you can win multiple games like that until you figure out what you're doing offensively, until Deshaun Watson, hopefully, for the Browns' sake, finds some kind of groove and finds a comfort level. And you should get David Njoku back. And hopefully the line gets healthier. And maybe Nick Chubb comes back, or Nick Chubb does come back. So I get it, but it is one game. If they go to Vegas and play better and they're 2-2, and then they go to Washington and win, you can figure out a way where this team can hang around until it figures stuff out. Now, that doesn't erase the problems, and those problems are still there. But we see how this league works. It's a crazy league. The Giants looked awful coming in, played pretty well, and won a game. Right, Carolina's 0-2, goes to Vegas and wins. Vegas goes to Baltimore and wins the week before. But you just have to play well that week. And the first step, like we've talked about a million times, is figuring out the protection and then getting Deshaun Watson to play better. And those two are interconnected.
I know you wrote an article about Alex, right? That's a young guy who, again, is kind of progressing and has taken some serious steps forward in his path as a D lineman.
Yeah, I think he has. And, as a rookie, he played, I want to say 17 games. And I don't think he had a quarterback hit. I know he didn't have a sack. He didn't have a quarterback hit. And it took until, I think, the second or third game of his second year to get a hit. And then he got a sack. And then there was another drought. And then at the end of last year, he really came on. And not that sacks are the end all be all, but they're a pretty good measurement when you're, when you're a pass rushing defensive end. And I think he finished with 4 in the last 5 games last year. Gets that huge one in Jacksonville. Now, he's third or fourth in the rotation, but he's playing valuable snaps. He's part of that when they go 4 ends. He's one of the ends out there in pass rush situations, slides inside. He's physical. He's physical in the run game. Gives him a different element because he's so big and so strong. So he's a guy, especially if Myles Garrett's playing fewer snaps because of, the foot or the feet injuries and whatever else is going on with Myles' legs. Wright's a guy that will probably play more and needs to keep having that production. And he's driven. One of the things that impressed me with our talk is how he's never satisfied and he's chasing this perfect game. He knows it's not possible. But even when he had that safety against Jacksonville, he was critiquing all the little things he didn't do well that game and not necessarily soaking in just, hey, I had one great play.
Yeah, and to your point, Garrett is day to day, and who knows what that means. You certainly hope he can play. Wright is a guy that might get a huge opportunity to step up there. This one's from your mailbag. Who do you think has been a stud? Who's been a dud for the Browns so far this season?
Yeah, Denzel Ward, I think, has been the best player. I mean, Myles Garrett, right? He had 2 sacks. He's dealing with the foot. He played even with he played fewer snaps than he normally does. Myles Garrett on Sunday against the Giants still had 3 quarterback hits, drew a holding penalty, had a bunch of pressures, and that's not at 100%. So he's on that list. I also think Denzel Ward, even though he only played 11 snaps against Jacksonville, played way more against the Giants. He's shown up every game. Bunch of passes defense, is around the ball. I'm just really impressed with how consistently good he is when he's healthy and available. He's, I don't know if he's the best corner in the league, but he is in that discussion. He is a legitimate Pro Bowl corner, and you see it week in, week out.
So we've already mentioned a little bit about the offensive line. Teller out. We have no idea about Wills, Conklin, Hudson as well at that point, and Jones. So there's a lot of speculation on what the offensive line might look like. None of it's real pretty. Here's one option that's being bantied about. Bitonio at left tackle, which we saw some. They kick Posick out to guard. Harris, Zinter, and either Jones or Conklin. It could be Hudson. It could be Ifedi. Man, that's when you talk about what you expected the line to be and then looking at that, there's a pretty stark difference.
Yeah, there is. I would be careful about moving Joe Bitonio to left tackle. I know he played there yesterday and he had to. They were out of tackles. But if you have 2 healthy ones, and that's all the guys you mentioned and Ifedi, I would not move Bitonio to left tackle. I would leave him at left guard. I would put Ifedi, whoever, I would put at left tackle before I would move Bitonio there. I just think you're weakening 2 positions. He doesn't like playing there. Leave him at guard. And then, Zinter's going to get, I would assume, and Kevin Stefanski would commit to it because of all the uncertainty on the line, but I would assume Zinter's going to take over for Teller at right guard. Drafted a guy in the 3rd round. He's played a ton of games at Michigan. He has to step in and play well, and that's the plan, and that's why they drafted him to be that 3rd guard. They got Javion Cohen, the undrafted rookie. He's an option at guard if you need another guard. But yeah, to me, the Bitonio thing, and I get it's Joe Bitonio, but I would not move him to left tackle unless they needed to.
Yeah, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. You're weakening 2 spots at that point, and he hasn't played that, and that is drastically different. And you're asking a guy who's kind of beat up to begin with from 10 years in the NFL. You're asking him to go outside and be more mobile, and I couldn't agree with you more. All right, Giants defense, and take a look at this. This is kind of interesting. They blitzed on 57% of the Browns' dropbacks, significantly higher than the 25% of the first 2 games they played that they did. Deshaun Watson, 8 of 18, 92 yards, a TD, and 7 sacks. 7 sacks, tied for the second most since ESPN started tracking pass rushers in 2006. And that, I mean, don't get me wrong, Deshaun Watson did not play well, but there were times when he hit, the back of his drop, and there was somebody on top of him multiple times.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think the Giants saw what the Cowboys did in week 1, and the Cowboys did it with confusion and said, hey, let's try it. And then if it doesn't work, they can go back to being their softer coverage. And it did work, and they just said, let's stick with it. And, yeah, I thought Watson was more to blame in week 1 for the sacks and the pressures. I thought he had time to get rid of the ball, and he was slow making decisions. Yesterday, I felt it was more about the lack of protection and the lack of identifying the pressure where it was coming from, where he didn't have a lot of chance. Now, there were plays where he could have gotten rid of the ball, and there were plays where, he could have thrown it and he had a guy open, or he could have gotten rid of it and without taking a hit. But all in all, I thought it was more about the protection. And again, it's a combination of guys getting beat one-on-one, guys getting beat on the twists and the stunts. The Browns have struggled with that throughout the season. And then not identifying who's coming and who's not, where to slide the protection. And part of that's Watson, but it's a lot the linemen, the tight ends, the running backs, and the coaching.
So this is from the 33rd team. They tweet out, lowest pressure rates allowed by rookie offensive linemen in week 3, minimum of 10 pass blocking snaps. Lowest, Mason McCormick, rookie for the Steelers, 13, and didn't allow any. J.C. Latham, Tennessee, 44 pass snaps, 1 pressure. Zach Frazier, also the Steelers, 35 snaps, 1 pressure. Zach Zinter for the Browns, 24 pass snaps, 1 pressure allowed. And again, it's a real small sample size with Zinter, but they brought him in when they went with the bigger personnel. I'm less concerned about Zach Zinter than I am what are you going to do with the guards, or the tackles rather, at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And I am by no means an offensive line expert or an interior offensive line expert, but he looked comfortable in the preseason. He looked comfortable in training camp. It doesn't feel too big for him. I don't know if he's like Joe Bitonio is kind of an elite athlete at guard. He can really move. I don't know if Zinter moves. I don't think Zinter moves like that, but I think he can play guard in this league. And that's the expectation. And if you draft a guy in the 3rd round, if you didn't have 2 Pro Bowl guards in front of him, you would think he'd be starting. Right? A lot of guards that are drafted in the 3rd round start right away. So he should be able to step in. I think there's a comfort level or confidence that he will be able to step in. And I talked to him last week, and the fact that he did play, I think it was 14 snaps, is that extra lineman, muscle tight end against Jacksonville. He thought it would help whenever he got the chance to play guard. And it's coming sooner than they would have hoped because of the Wyatt Teller injury. But he thought that time on the field, you get speed of the game, you get the feel for what these linemen are like. He thinks that was going to help him when he became, when he got a chance to play guard.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, BrownsZone.com, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. I was at the stadium today, and I just listened to the press conference. I saw no heart, no desire, and all he kept saying in the press conference is, we'll fix that. We'll get better. Well, doesn't fixing it and fitting it better start with the head coach? I saw no heart in that team. He didn't seem like he had a clue of what that team could accomplish,
wouldn't accomplish or is about to accomplish with him as head coach? In answer to that, I'll tell you what they're about to accomplish. Nothing. All right. Thanks, guys. Go Browns. Bye.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. So, Scott, Pile On Monday is in full effect. I don't question. I don't ever question players' hearts. If you, and you've been on the field, I've been on the field. Television does not do any justice to how brutal and brutally physical that game is.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, you know, there's games where it feels like the effort's not there, and sometimes the players will say that or the coaches will say that. They're having that discussion in Las Vegas last night and today. I didn't get that sense yesterday. I don't. I think this team has too many leaders on it. I think their expectations are high. It's week 3, and I don't think the heart was an issue. You know, you can critique a bunch of stuff and a bunch of plays and this and that. I don't think Kevin Stefanski's the problem. I really don't. They have issues, and you know, I know hearing "we will be better." I get it. That gets old. It gets old. You know, I've heard it a million times. You know, it doesn't help my stories for him saying "we will be better," but I also don't know what else he's supposed to say. And he takes responsibility, and every time a thing about protection or fourth down comes up, he says, I need to be better. I need to give the guys a better chance. So, you know, I think he's in a no-win situation when they lose, and I get that, and it's his job. But I don't think Kevin Stefanski is the problem.
No, I agree. And think back to what he doesn't want to do, being Kevin Stefanski. He doesn't want to start the finger pointing. We lived through enough of that, and that's why he diffuses it by saying we have to get better. That's what those. So for anybody that gets aggravated about what he's saying, he is in meeting rooms pointing out stuff, but he's not going to do that through the media. And you realize it as a media member. I realize it. That's, you know, it makes our job a little tougher, but that's why he's doing that.
Oh, without a doubt. And you know, if you want to just spin it to Deshaun Watson a bit, you're right, he hasn't played great, obviously. And is not, you know, he hasn't thrown for 200 yards yet, and all the numbers that have him near the bottom of the league in different statistics. But unless they're ready to move on from Deshaun Watson, whether that means bench him or, you know, eventually get rid of him, which they're not close to either, then you got to support the guy. And you certainly have to support him publicly, but I think you got to support him publicly and privately. And that's what the Browns are doing. So, you know, does it help Kevin Stefanski to say, oh my gosh, he had a guy wide open and missed him? No, that doesn't help. But he can say, yeah, okay, everybody makes mistakes, and he did this well and this well and this well. And I think that's just where they are right now. And they're trying to build Watson up to be the guy that they hope he can be.
All right, so this is interesting and concerning all in one. 3 teams averaging more yards per rushing play than passing play through 3 weeks. Patriots, Browns, and Titans. Now, the Browns have the 3rd most passing attempts and the least yards per passing play at 3.5. They also have averaged 4.3 yards per rushing play and have the 8th fewest rushing attempts. So, and I think, Scott, that was one of the frustrating, they couldn't run the ball. So that's another one. Got to figure that out. That's a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of bad things about that stat, and one of them is it's not like they're running the ball great.
Right.
So if you're not running it great and it's still a better average than you're passing, yeah, it's like a double whammy of, I don't know, garbage. So, you know, they ran it 7 times for 7 yards in the first half. And people can question, well, why don't they commit to the run more? Well, that's part of the reason. It's tough as a play caller to keep going back when you're getting 1 yard a carry. So they need to be better at that. They didn't have the same commitment that they did against Jacksonville. And part of that could have been they thought they could run it against, or they thought they could throw it against the Giants. So they didn't think they needed to come out and establish that run. But then they didn't have a ton of success throwing it. You know, just shots to Cooper here and there was about it. So, yeah, they got plenty to figure out, both in the run and the pass. And that's why, just to touch on it again, the defense's performance in the first half is frustrating because if they keep them in the game longer, it gives them a better chance, right? But when you get down 21-7 and you think the defense should be better than that, it just feels too insurmountable. Where if the defense, if Greg Newsome doesn't get that penalty, right, and then you get more points early, like things change the game. But giving up 21 points in the first half and the last 7 came off a Deshaun Watson fumble, I get that. But the offense needs as much help as it can get right now, and the defense just hasn't given it enough, even though the defense has played okay.
The one thing that I would say about the defense yesterday, I never thought I would see 2 7.5-minute plus drives against this defense. I mean, that shouldn't happen. You've got too much talent across this defense to allow that to happen, especially to a middling team like the Giants. I'm being kind when I say middling.
Yeah, I hear you. I thought Brian Daboll did a wonderful job calling plays. He took advantage of some of the Browns' aggression with screens. They ran those jet sweeps to neighbors, and those are hard to defend, especially if you got a bunch of guys on the line of scrimmage like the Browns tend to. They ran some swing passes to neutralize Myles Garrett. I thought it was a really well-designed, those couple of drives. And then Malik Neighbors goes up and takes an interception away from Martin Emerson Jr. Right? That's a great play. Martin Emerson Jr. is in perfect spot. It should be the end of a drive and no touchdown. And yet Neighbors makes the catch, turns it into a touchdown. Greg Newsome gets the penalty, which erases an interception, and then that turns into a touchdown drive. And they had a third down on that drive, too, when Newsome misses a tackle that would have forced a punt. So that's how these drives happen. If one of those plays changes, you're off the field, but it's a combination of all those things. But I agree. I just didn't see the Giants being able to score 21, and 7 of those were aided by the turnover. But still, I thought it was going to be a 10-point game. Daniel Jones would throw a bunch of interceptions, and that just didn't happen.
So Adam Schefter tweets this out. Antonio Pierce, head coach of the Raiders, told reporters he's not ruling out a quarterback change. He was not happy after the game yesterday and said certain players made business decisions during the game, and he, as the head coach, would be making business decisions relative to playing time. So I guess the question becomes, Scott, what do the Browns need to do to get back on track? You can't fall to 1-3. We keep saying you can't do this, you can't do that, and they're doing it, but you really can't fall to 1-3.
No, I mean, yeah, it's a big game, it's a big win. Get to 2-2, things feel better. They need to be cleaner. They need to not turn the ball over. They need to protect better, and they probably need to try to win a game like 17-14, because they've yet to score 20 points. So I think maybe you change the style of play. You try to shorten the game. Is that running more? Is that because if you run more, it takes some pressure off Deshaun Watson, off your offensive line to protect 45 times. And then the defense needs to have a huge game. And it played well against Jacksonville, but it needs to have a huge game. And it got its first turnover against Dallas. I think they need to get a bunch of turnovers. That's the easiest way to say, okay, how can this team win? Is for the defense to have a dominating effort. And that feels possible against a team that doesn't know who it's going to play at quarterback. Even though Gardner Minshew had a great game against the Browns last year when he was with the Colts. But I think they have to rely on this defense, and this defense needs to start faster and put a complete game together that includes takeaways.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. You can also see his work, brownzone.com, on the internet. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s, $10 each. 10 times multipliers, 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, love the show. Man, the Browns looked atrocious on Sunday. The offensive line definitely needs work. Deshaun Watson looks very uncomfortable in this offense. You know, they're going to say, yeah, we're getting Nick Chubb back, but where that offensive line is playing, I don't even know if I want him to play. The chance of getting hurt again. Deshaun Watson don't fit what Stefanski wants to do. Stefanski doesn't fit what Watson can do. I just think that was the wrong choice for a quarterback. So to me, that's not the type of quarterback that Stefanski needs. He needs somebody who can stand in the pocket and just run the offense. But Watson's probably still good, don't get me wrong, but I just don't feel like he's a fit for what Stefanski wants to do. And they've got big offensive line problems. Jed Wills came back, didn't look real great. They just don't look good. So I want to hear your thoughts. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Ashley, I don't have an answer. The offensive line did not look good. I think Wills and Jones probably didn't want to play him, and they didn't have better options. They neither one looked like they were even 80% movement of what they normally have.
Yeah, I just got done rewatching at least the first 2.5 quarters of the game right now, and it's tough on rewatch to see those guys because you're right. I mean, I think it just looks like they're hesitant. They are not fully, willing to commit to some of these blocks, it seems like. And it's tough. I mean, I think you look at these injuries on this line, it makes me nervous for when Jack Conklin comes back. I think ultimately with any three of these guys, DeJuan Jones, Jed Wills, Jack Conklin, who suffered these season-ending knee injuries last year, you don't want to risk bringing them back too early. And obviously today we still didn't get a final word on Jed Wills and his knee issue and what exactly is going on with him, what his timetable might be from Kevin Stefanski. But it was a tough watch out there yesterday, and it's tough, even tougher, I think, on the rewatch to sit through and watch some of the issues that line was having and just how porous it was, quite honestly.
So, when you looked at the Giants, the one thing I saw and the one thing I realized is, boy, you can't let Malik Neighbors beat you. And darn if he didn't go out and beat him. I know you wrote an article about it. Take us through that.
Yeah, so had a chance today once the snap count data and all of the matchup data on Pro Football Focus was out to kind of figure out what exactly went wrong. And we had a chance to ask Kevin Stefanski about it. The Browns didn't shadow Neighbors with anybody. They didn't stick Denzel Ward on him and say, hey, you're following him wherever he goes. They opted to keep their corners split left and right pretty much. So once the Giants, I think, realized that Denzel Ward wasn't following Malik Neighbors, they felt like there were certain advantages they had when he was going up against Martin Emerson. I mean, it sounded like Malik Neighbors watched a lot of film on Martin Emerson. He talked after the game about how he actually suggested the play that scored his first touchdown to Daniel Jones and the coaches because he thought that he had sensed this pattern with Martin Emerson in the film that he was undercutting routes, and that's exactly what he got him to do on that play. And he got him pinned on his back hip and was able to go up for that acrobatic leaping grab in the back left corner of the end zone. So looking at that data, all 3 targets that Martin Emerson was defending Malik Neighbors for, he caught all 3 of those passes. It was good for, they were all good for, I think, 43 or so yards. So more than half of his total yardage in the game came against Martin Emerson. Now, Denzel Ward actually had more targets, which I was surprised about seeing this morning, because it seemed like Martin was just on him more in that game. But I think it just seems like more because he did much more damage going against Martin Emerson. He caught 2 of 4 passes going against Denzel Ward. Those were only good for 8 yards, only 1 yard after the catch. Obviously, no touchdowns going against Denzel. So I think ultimately the Giants found a good matchup. They exploited it. They exploited some of these tendencies that their rookie was able to realize from film study, and they just took advantage in a way that this Browns defense was not able to counter. Kevin Stefanski today didn't go into much detail about why they didn't shadow him, just that sometimes we see something in matchups and we decide to stick with left or right. So I'm not sure exactly what they saw, but I think they were focusing on the wrong things based on what we saw on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, Neighbors, as I'm watching him, I'm like, that's why you take a guy high in the first round as a wide receiver. There's just something about him. All right, this is from ESPN, Week 3 questions, takeaways, ESPN.com. Biggest question for each NFL team after Week 3. Will the Browns' offensive line injury sink the offense? So they lost 3 linemen, Teller, Hudson, who was a healthy tackle, Jedrick Wills, who has been banged up. They also didn't have Conklin, so it's actually 4. Describe the game in 2 words. Total disappointment. Browns entered the matchup near touchdown favorites, but were down 14 at half, despite recovering a fumble on the opening kickoff and scoring on the next play. Biggest hole in the game plan, not adjusting to the Giants' blitzes quickly enough, was apparent early. New York was going to test the Browns' protection with blitzes, and it worked for much of the game. Part of that might have been, that first and third one might have been interrelated, just because I don't know that it was they didn't react to it or they couldn't react to it based on guys that weren't 100% playing on the offensive line.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, but I do think the Giants blitzed more than this offense was expecting. At least that's how I took it, especially when Deshaun Watson, the way he said that yesterday in his post-game press conferences, that it didn't look like how we thought it would look. So it might have been some of these mistakes were happening because, hey, your line's not at full strength. But I don't know, too, because it was like, to me yesterday, once they had to shuffle that line, it almost felt like that was the best it looked. Like most of Deshaun Watson's sacks in this game came before that happened. So I don't know if it was just like adrenaline kicking in because they were in a really tough spot or what, but it was tough. I mean, Joel Bitonio at left tackle was like the best look I think they got there in this game, and that's saying something. So it's really hard, I think, for your quarterback to operate when there's not a ton of good things happening at that left tackle spot, and you have guys going in and out, and you're constantly having to rotate guys this early in the season, and then your starting left tackle comes back. He still doesn't look really right after rehabbing his injury, and then he gets hurt again, and now, who knows how long Jed Wills may have to be out. Again, we didn't get an update on him today, but it can be a combination of both. But I also think the Giants called a really good game against the Browns, and I think trying to test that out, knowing that, hey, the Browns have given up the most pressures in the league through 2 weeks. Why don't we try and make Deshaun Watson beat us while applying that pressure? I think was a really good strategy. And I think you look at, too, I mean, for the Giants offense, that part of the game was called really well, too. So I think it's a combination of all of those things working together.
Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K-12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. You know, fans want to bash Watson because that's the thing to do. They want to blame him since everyone else is blaming him. If I were Stefanski, how can I sit back and watch the film and be okay with trotting out the same exact players along the O-line? This isn't some one-off bad game. This has been happening for 3 weeks in a row. I don't care if we have Joe Montana back there. No QB can succeed with that terrible O-line. Stefanski has to make changes, or this season is doomed to fail. Watson cannot do anything back there without some level of protection. Open your eyes, people, and actually dissect the game. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Ashley, there were times where Watson hit the back of his drop and the pressure was on him, without question. There were also times where he's got to get rid of the ball a little bit quicker. But everybody on that off, it was not one area. It wasn't Watson. It wasn't the line.
Yeah.
It was the play calling. It was the line. It was Watson. Everybody deserves. It was that bad.
It's true. And I mean, I think the Cowboys game was like that as well, where you look at certain things the offensive line did. You can see certain plays and certain sacks or hits where you're like, oh gosh, the offensive line really broke down there. And this game, it's the same thing. But then there are certain plays where, like you look at the quarterback and you just need to get rid of the ball quicker. I mean, I just, before I hopped on here, rewatched the Kayvon Thibodeau sack where DeJuan Jones had just come in to replace the injured James Hudson after James had to leave with his shoulder injury. DeJuan had already been benched at that point. And yes, DeJuan ultimately got beat on that sack, but that was the prime example of a play to me where Deshaun had forever with that football. He really should have gotten rid of it in that situation before then. But there were plenty of times I watched throughout that game where, oh my gosh, the offensive line is just playing in his lap, essentially. Like, what's he supposed to do? There was another play where he didn't get sacked on it, but he had no time to step up into the pocket, or no room, I should say, to step into his throw because the pressure was just coming around him. So I definitely think, hey, right now, the blame goes all around, right? But I mean, it's wild that they essentially ran out of O linemen yesterday. When the caller asks, why don't they put somebody else in? Well, they did yesterday. They actually ran out of people. I don't know what the contingency plan would have been if anybody else got hurt, but it was not good. And I think they're going to have to, I'm sure they're already doing this, start making some phone calls, figure out what's going on, how much time everybody's going to have to miss. But they might need to call in for some reinforcements that are not currently on this 53-man roster, because they're running out of bodies if anyone else has to miss any extended amount of time, I think.
So think about that, and then take a look. This is discouraging week 3 snap rates. Jacob Gibbs tweets this out. Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver rookie, 11%. Deontay Foreman, Browns running back, 14%. Ezekiel Elliott, 20%. You see the other ones. There were two things. I wanted them to go big personnel, and then I realized they couldn't. You don't have extra linemen to put in. But Foreman gives them something that Jerome Ford doesn't. And my guess is they liked Ford's speed, but there's something to be said for a guy that's going to get you 3, 4, 5 yards so that you're not looking behind the sticks the entire time.
Yeah, Deontay Foreman, I think, is really good at playing that Kareem Hunt sort of role, right? And getting those short yardage plays, and he can be more active in the pass game. And yeah, Dave, I thought the same thing yesterday. I'm like, gosh, they ran out of bodies to do that big personnel. But technically earlier at the game, they did have those bodies available, those extra bodies. So that's like what's tough is you look at what they did in Jacksonville, and obviously that worked so well. They went to that big personnel, those jumbo packages on the very first play of that game, and it was a Deontay Foreman carry. So I'm not sure what exactly they saw. I think my guess would be that they didn't want to try to run on the ground against Dexter Lawrence. Teams tried to avoid doing that. They even talked about it on the broadcast that normally when Dexter Lawrence gets his breaks are when teams try to run. So I'm guessing because they have a pretty prominent D tackle, they were like, hey, maybe this isn't going to work, and we are having these issues, and Jed's coming back, and it's his first game back since November, and maybe we want to save our guys in case something happens. So in that case, I get the thinking. But of course, in hindsight, it's easy to be like, well, this worked in Jacksonville. Why didn't you try it here? But I really do think it was certain game planning things that they just thought these jumbo packages were maybe not going to help them as much as it did last week.
Here's an interesting one as well. Take a look at Myles Garrett, a 45.8% pass rush win rate against the Giants, by far the best in Week 3. Fourth highest graded player on the defense, and remember he did that and is banged up both feet, legs. Missed time, missed snaps. Now we did hear today he's kind of day to day, but man, the more he's out there, the better it is for this defense, and this defense is going to have to carry this team for a few more weeks if they're gonna get where they want to go.
Yeah, I think if Myles Garrett has to miss any extended amount of time, it's really concerning for this team because you can't really replicate what he does. And yes, like Jim Schwartz rotates his defensive linemen a lot, right? But losing the NFL Defensive Player of the Year, like you can't make up for that, and you can't make up for his production, and you can't make up for his bend and his speed and the pressure he's able to create. And I said this yesterday in the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. It's like this defense was built around Myles Garrett, from the scheme to hiring Jim Schwartz to implement that scheme to the pass rushers they put around him. And you see throughout various games that Myles can impact a play so much without getting the credit for it or getting the stat for it. I even think about last week in Jacksonville, that Alex Wright safety happened because he was able to get to Trevor Lawrence because Myles Garrett basically put him into Alex Wright's lap, essentially. And Myles got that initial pressure. He makes plays like that all the time. So without him, I mean, that would be a huge blow to this defense, therefore to this team. It just wouldn't be good. So I think it was like a bit of good news today to hear, oh, it's a day-to-day thing and not a week-to-week thing, or not an immediate, oh, we know he's going to have to miss X amount of weeks. I mean, we know Myles Garrett plays through a lot injury-wise. He fights his way through a lot. So we may never really know everything he's fighting through, but we do know it's multiple things at this point, right? It's both feet. He said he's having some overcompensation issues. It's all throughout his lower body, it sounds like, at this point. So it's going to be, I think, a tough few weeks coming up for him and for this defense, and figuring out, hey, how long is he going to be able to maintain like day to day and hanging around out there? But they definitely need him.
Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I. Going to step aside, take one more time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You know what I think? I don't think you have the stones.
Oh, I've got the stones. I think you're the one that don't have the stones.
Let's settle this once and for all.
Amble up to the 4 new Ohio Lottery scratch-offs with all kinds of stones. Gemstones, diamond, emerald, sapphire, and ruby 10s, $10 each. 10 times multipliers, 2 fast spots for quick draw wins of up to $100 and a $500,000 grand prize. Which one will you get when you order them up? Well, that's just the luck of the draw.
We continue talking Browns with Ashley Bastock, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Where do I start? I mean, obviously, yesterday's result wasn't what we thought would happen, and I think we really need to have some hard conversations regarding Deshaun. I understand replacing him with any quarterback isn't going to fix the situation, but I think my faith in Deshaun is starting to dwindle. He hasn't really been able to flourish in the offense that Kevin has presented him. He presented him with the West Coast spread offense, and it's just like we haven't even been able to put up 20 points since last year. We need to see some results in the next couple of weeks, or we need to be talking about a whole nother quarterback. We need a young, energetic quarterback that's going to fit this system better. Like, if we can get somebody who's mobile or somebody who can command the offense in the draft, which I don't see any for real, they're really in some trouble, some serious trouble.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Yeah, Ashley, we talked about the offense and how they were building it around Deshaun, and it hasn't looked good. There's no other way to say it.
Yeah, I mean, it really hasn't. It hasn't lived up to those very high expectations so far. I mean, I do think first and foremost is the protection issues that they've had, right? I mean, if you can't protect your quarterback isn't going to be able to operate. And again, I think those protection issues, the blame can be cast in just about every direction. It is not just on this offensive line or the injuries they have there. So I think that's certainly made it difficult. Obviously, not having Nick Chubb is a very difficult thing to have to deal with because you don't have that surefire threat on the ground. Obviously, losing David Njoku in week 1 is a huge deal. You know, there are certain plays throughout the game yesterday where you look at, and Jordan Akins made a couple of nice catches, but you know, one of his catches was good for less than 10 yards. It was kind of hard to not look at it and be like, oh, if David was in that play, would it have been like a 16-yard catch or something like that, right? Would it have been a first down kind of play? So that's tough. And I think like the one good thing yesterday was seeing him and Amari Cooper get on the same page, because Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper just were struggling to find that chemistry throughout the first 2 games. We knew Amari obviously had 2 very big drops in each week 1 and week 2 that would have been good for touchdowns for the Browns. And yesterday you saw those 2 guys connect. And I think that was, if you want something to be hopeful about heading into week 4, for me, that was it, was seeing kind of Amari Cooper get into a groove. Because, you know, those are 2 guys who didn't play in the preseason. And Amari talked about, who knows, like missing spring during his mini holdout at that time. If that impacted him, it's kind of hard to guess. But to me, I thought, hey, at least those 2 are looking like they have something they can build on now going into week 4.
All right, before I let you go, most concerning thing you saw yesterday from the Browns' perspective, and then what can they do to get things turned around and get a win? They need a win in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most concerning thing, we've been talking about it here for the last half hour, is the protection and what's going on with this Cleveland O-line and all the injuries there. And truthfully, I don't know the easy answer to fix it. Like I said earlier, I mean, I think they need to probably make some calls and see what other bodies they can get in here that they can trust. I mean, the problem is there's not a lot of good tackles just left sitting out there right now, waiting for a team to call them, right? That can get up and play. So I'm not exactly sure what the solution is, but they have to figure out these protection issues and maybe, you know, scheme up more that Deshaun Watson is getting the ball out quicker. And unfortunately, that's not going to give you the full Deshaun Watson experience, but maybe then your quarterback won't be getting hit, you know, 20 times between sacks and actual QB hits in a game. And maybe that's the starting point for right now, even though it's not ideal for what you want your offense to look like. But you're going to have to figure out how to add bodies and work with the guys that you do have currently available on that line.
The other thing that was really concerning is 2 long drives by Daniel Jones and the Giants. And again, I know they're NFL players and they're NFL teams. I didn't think, you know, an 8-minute drive, a 7.5-minute drive, I didn't think it would happen against this defense. To see 2 of them in the same half, really concerning.
Yeah, and I mean, it's concerning. It seems like Brian Daboll picked up on some of this defense's tendencies. I mean, I talked about that Malik Neighbors touchdown over Martin Emerson. That was one example. But, you know, even Brian Daboll calling that sweep for Neighbors on 4th and 1 on that first scoring drive the Giants had, right? Like they knew to do those things and they knew how to take advantage of the Browns defense's aggressiveness and kind of getting their D linemen upfield and neutralizing them essentially. So I don't know, like we're going to have to see if teams are going to copycat essentially that game plan, because I do think, hey, that might turn into somewhat of a concern if this defense's aggressiveness is getting used against it.
Ashley Bastock, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Ashley.
Thank you. Ashley
Bastock. Make sure you check her out. Always really good Browns coverage, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.